Hey guys, tonight we step back into a time before paved streets, electric lamps, or even the vague comfort of a squeaky mattress. You're lying on your side in the cold dimness, breathing in the faint smell of smoke, animal hide, and damp grass. The sun hasn't yet decided to make an appearance, but the world is already waking in small ways. The rustle of leaves outside, a low grunt from someone else in the shelter, the faint pop of a dying ember. You probably won't survive this, by the way, just being realistic. But for now, you're blissfully unaware of the countless ways this morning could go wrong. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where in the world you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You open your eyes to the thin glow leaking in through the woven reeds at the entrance. The ground beneath you is a mat of dried grass and bundled reeds, scratchy against your cheek but better than bare dirt. You roll onto your back, stretching your stiff legs, and your gaze catches the faint coil of smoke curling from last night's fire. The fire pit sits in the centre, ringed with charred stones, the embers still smouldering faintly like a sleeping animal's breath. Outside, there's a pale haze in the air, and the first distant trill of a bird cuts through the silence. Your breath puffs in faint white clouds. The air smells of earth and ash, tinged with that sweet, slightly gamey scent of hide and fur. Somewhere nearby, a child coughs, the sound muffled under a bundle of skins. You push yourself up slowly, rubbing your shoulders. The joints crackle like the embers. It's another day, and like every other day, your first thaw. HTS turn to warmth, food, and making sure you haven't been quietly surrounded by something with claws while you slept. A little light leaks into the shelter as someone moves the door flap aside. Cool air brushes your face, carrying the distant smell of damp soil and something faintly floral. The sky outside is painted with thin streaks of pink, the sun still hiding just below the horizon. You can make out the silhouette of a few others already at work. Someone squatting to poke at their own fire, another kneeling to chip at a stone tool. You kneel beside the embers and pick up a stick, poking gently to stir the coals. A few sparks leap upward, vanishing in the dim light. You blow softly, coaxing the faint glow into something livelier. The warmth licks your fingertips as the embers respond, crackling back to life. You tuck a few dry twigs into the pit, collected the evening before because wet wood is just asking for misery, and watch as the first little flames catch. There's a rhythm to this moment that's older than language. The fire is more than heat. It's safety, a circle of light that predators hesitate to cross. You know without thinking that without it, nights are too long and too dangerous. Historians still argue whether early humans mastered fire for warmth first or for cooking, but right now its purpose is simple. It's your lifeline. As the fire gains strength, the rest of the camp stirs. You hear the rustle of hides being folded back, the thump of footsteps outside, a quiet, muttered exchange in the half-light. Somewhere to your right, a bundle of reeds is untied, revealing a stash of yesterday's berries, shriveled now but edible enough to share. You pop one into your mouth, the tartness jolting you awake, your stomach tightening in quiet request for more. There's no sense of rush hour here, no calendar reminder pinging in your mind. The day ahead will be shaped by instinct, weather, and what's running or growing nearby. You might need to join a foraging group, trail after the hunters, or help patch the shelter roof if the clouds gathering on the horizon decide to break. Your eyes scan the tree line beyond camp, a jagged, uneven wall of green and shadow. Somewhere out there, something is moving, but the distance and mist hide its shape. You step outside fully, letting the cold nip at your bare arms. The ground is damp from last night's dew, clinging to your toes with every step. The smell of earth is sharper here, laced with a hint of smoke drifting from another fire nearby. In the distance, the faint shapes of hills rise, dark and brooding against the growing light. The chatter around camp grows, voices overlapping in low tones. A young boy stumbles past with a bundle of sticks twice his height, dragging lines through the dirt as he walks. Someone laughs quietly, tossing a handful of seeds toward the fire to roast. You catch the smell of them warming, nutty, earthy, your stomach rumbling in appreciation. You pause a moment, tilting your face toward the sky. The air carries the sound of a river not far off, a faint rush that's always there, like a heartbeat you only notice when you're still. Somewhere overhead, a bird cries, a sharp, echoing call, and you glance up to see its shadow cutting briefly across the rising sun. The day has begun in earnest now. The fire crackles steadily behind you, and the camp is fully awake. You know you'll need to decide soon whether to wander into the woods for berries or follow the others toward the open plains where the herds might be grazing. Either way, the rhythm of survival beats on, steady and unrelenting. For now, though, you let yourself breathe in the cold morning air, your senses alive to every detail, every sound, every shift of shadow in the growing light. You squat by the rekindled fire, holding your hands out until the sting of the morning chill eases. The flames sway lazily, throwing thin ribbons of warmth against your palms. Behind you, someone gives a low whistle, your signal to join the morning foraging group. You glance at the small stash of last night's roasted tubers, each one wrapped in a charred husk. They're gone in 3 bites, the smoky sweetness clinging to your teeth. It's time to prepare for the day's work. Morning foraging isn't glamorous, but it's the heartbeat of the camp. Without it, your evenings would be a lot hungrier. You pull on a strip of woven fibre, slinging it across your shoulder like a bag. Inside, you place a flint blade and a small bone awl, useful for digging stubborn roots or prying apart seed pods. The fibre scratches your skin as you adjust the strap, but you barely notice anymore. Before heading out, you squat by the fire pit to pluck a half-burned branch from the edge. The charred tip will be handy later, not for fire starting, but for marking trails and maybe scaring away a curious predator. Historians still argue whether early humans marked paths intentionally or if such charcoal smears were accidental, but you know from experience how comforting it is to see one and know you're headed the right way. You step out into the pale morning light, your bare feet pressing into cool earth. The foraging party is small today. Just you, an older woman with hair like tangled silver threads, and 2 boys not yet old enough for hunting spears. They carry wicker baskets, already chatting in quick bursts, their laughter startling a bird from the underbrush. The older woman carries no weapon, but her eyes are sharper than any blade. The forest waits. Its canopy swallows the early light, replacing it with a shifting green glow. The air is damp and full of layered smells, crushed leaves, faint rot, and a hint of something floral hiding deeper inside. You push through ferns that spring back against your legs, the fronds leaving cool, wet streaks on your skin. The first find of the morning comes quickly. Near a fallen log, you notice a cluster of dark berries, glistening as if someone polished them. You crouch, fingers brushing over the small fruits. The silver-haired woman steps closer, her voice low and even. "Not these." She points to a faint reddish stem, her signal that they're not worth the gamble. You straighten slowly, wiping your hands on your thigh, and make a mental note. Shiny doesn't always mean edible. Instead, you turn toward a patch of broadleaf plants you spotted a few steps back. Beneath their shade, the soil bulges slightly, exactly the way it does over certain tubers. You drop to your knees, using your flint blade to scrape gently at the dirt. Soon, you uncover a root thick as your wrist. It smells earthy and faintly sweet, promising the kind of slow-cooked softness that will keep bellies quiet through the night. The boys wander ahead, kicking at a rotten stump until it collapses with a soft sigh. They dig through it for grubs, popping the plump ones into a small gourd. The older woman chuckles under her breath, and you can't help but smirk. Nothing says breakfast quite like a handful of wriggling protein. You grab one, the creature's tiny legs tickling your skin, then drop it into the gourd before you start wondering what it would taste like raw. A little further in, you pause to listen. Somewhere to your left, there's a faint rustle. It could be wind, but the pattern is too irregular. You motion for the others to stay still, crouching low and peering through the ferns. A hare bolts suddenly from the brush, its fur the same shade as the dry leaves. The boys give a short chase, but return empty-handed, still laughing breathlessly. Deeper in the forest you find a surprise. Hanging from a low branch is a strange tangle of dried vines twisted into a near circle by wind or perhaps deliberate hands. You trace a finger over it. Could be nothing. Could be a marker left by another group. Historians still argue whether early human groups used such signs for communication or if nature simply made its own patterns, but either way, you leave it untouched. The silver-haired woman spots something next, tiny flowers with bright yellow centers growing in a cluster at the base of a tree. She gestures for you to take some. Their petals smell faintly of honey, and you remember hearing an elder swear they help calm the stomach. You tuck them carefully into your fiber bag, their scent rising every time you move. Hours pass like this. Step, crouch, dig, move on. Your body warms with the work, the damp chill replaced by a sheen of sweat along your neck and back. The ground changes beneath your feet, shifting from soft soil to scattered stones, and you know you're nearing the edge of the forest. The light ahead brightens. You emerge into a small clearing, the sun now high enough to warm your face. You take a deep breath, savouring the mix of forest musk and open-air freshness. The boys drop their baskets to compare finds, roots, seeds, a few nuts cracked open to show the pale meat inside. The older woman checks each one, setting aside anything suspicious. By the time you return to camp, your bag is comfortably heavy. The fire has grown and the smell of roasting seeds greets you before you step into the clearing. Others glance up, their eyes flicking to your finds. You pass the flowers to the healer, the tubers to the cook, and the rest into a communal pile. The day is just beginning, but already you've stacked the odds a little more in your favor. Survival here is never certain, but every root, seed, and scrap of knowledge tilts the balance. And right now, with your hands warm from the fire and your bag empty, but your belly soon to be full, that's enough. You settle by the fire for a brief moment, letting the warmth seep back into your damp fingers. Across the camp, someone is bent over a flat slab of stone, sending a steady tap-tap-tap into the quiet air. That sound is the heartbeat of the Stone Age. It means someone is making tools. Your own flint blade has dulled from digging tubers, so you wander over, feeling the soft give of the earth under your bare feet. The toolmaker, a wiry man with shoulders shaped by years of repetitive motion, glances up briefly but says nothing. His focus is absolute. He's working a core of flint into a sharp-edged scraper, holding it in one hand while the other wields a hammerstone. Each strike sends tiny flakes spinning away, some catching the light like shards of ice. You crouch beside him, reaching for your own piece of flint. You've done this before. The rhythm is meditative. Position the stone, angle the hammer, strike just enough to shear off a flake without shattering the whole thing. The sound is crisp, a mix of sharp crack and muted thud. The first few strikes go well. You feel that satisfying give as a flake peels away, but soon the edge begins to look uneven. You rotate it, adjusting, imagining the final tool's purpose. Historians still argue whether early humans specialized their tools for very specific jobs or simply adapted whatever was at hand. but you know from experience that a scraper with the right edge can make the difference between a clean hide and a ruined one. The wiry man leans over, picks up your blade and inspects it. He grunts, then shows you a finer trick, using a smaller stone to press instead of strike, chipping in tiny controlled bursts. You mimic the motion, feeling the difference immediately. The edge grows finer, more precise. You run your thumb gently along it, not too close unless you want a new scar to explain, and nod in quiet satisfaction. Nearby, a woman sits cross-legged, grinding ochre into powder between two stones. The pigment stains her hands red, seeping into the creases of her skin. You ask what it's for, though you already suspect. Paint for marking, perhaps the beginnings of something on the shelter wall. She shrugs, smirking, and says it's for keeping the bad spirits away. Though her tone suggests even she isn't entirely convinced, you can't help but think of the last time you saw someone smear ochre across their face before a hunt. Whether for intimidation or belief, it worked well enough to make the other tribe keep their distance. You turn back to your flint, a few more chips, and the edge is ready. You test it on a strip of rawhide lying nearby, pulling it taut and slicing downward. The blade bites through with a clean, satisfying hiss. You picture yourself later, crouched over a hide, scraping away fat and sinew, making it soft enough to wear. The thought makes you oddly proud. This tool will be an extension of you, a silent partner in every task. A boy ambles over, watching the process with wide eyes. He points to a discarded flake, one side razor-sharp. You hand it to him, warning him about its edge. He grins and holds it up to the light, marveling at how it looks like nothing more than a piece of broken rock yet can slice meat clean through. You pause for a moment, your hands dusted with flint powder. There's a weight to the tools you make here. Not just in the stone, but in the knowledge that without them, life would grind to a halt. You think of the times your blade dulled mid-task, the frustration of scraping at something stubborn, and how each new edge feels like a fresh start. Beyond the tool-making area, you can hear faint laughter and the occasional splash. Someone's near the river, probably testing a new spear tip. You remember last season when a poorly made spear shattered on impact, sending splinters into the hunter's arm. You glance at your own work again, running your finger near the edge without touching. Good, sharp, clean. A breeze stirs the camp, carrying with it the mingled scents of smoke, damp earth, and something faintly metallic from the freshly worked flint. You breathe it in, feeling a kind of quiet pride settle over you. Making a tool is more than just shaping stone. It's a conversation between your hands, the material, and the needs of the day. You place the finished blade in your woven pouch, brushing the flint dust from your lap. The wiry man gives you a curt nod, his version of praise, and turns back to his own work, striking the next core with patient precision. You stand, stretching your stiff legs, feeling the pouch's slight weight at your hip. Somewhere in the back of your mind, you know you'll remember this moment the next time you slice cleanly through a hide or carve a strip of wood into something useful. With your blade ready, the day feels a little safer, a little more manageable. Out here, survival often comes down to the sharpness of your tools, and now yours is ready for whatever comes next. You adjust the pouch at your hip, feeling the new flint blade settle against your side like a quiet promise, and make your way toward the edge of camp. The hunters are already gathered there, crouched in a half circle, their faces lit by the pale mid-morning sun. A thin mist still hugs the grass, curling around their ankles. You spot the leader, a tall man with a scar across his cheek, running his fingers along the edge of a spear tip, nodding to himself. You're not the fastest runner in the group, but your eyes are sharp, and that's your value today. Tracking is a skill you've grown into over seasons of patient observation, squinting at bent blades of grass, faint depressions in the soil, and the way broken twigs point like accidental arrows. Historians still argue whether early humans learned these patterns from instinct or from generations of shared knowledge, but in your case, it's been drilled into you by elders who never missed a hoofprint. The group moves out in silence, slipping into the tall grass beyond camp. The morning air is damp against your skin, carrying the scents of earth and distant water. You keep your head low, eyes scanning the ground for signs of movement. A narrow track emerges, the grass flattened and muddy. Kneeling, you trace a print with your finger, two deep, rounded impressions with a slight gap between. You whisper, "Deer," and the leader gives a quick nod. The trail leads toward a stand of trees, where the light breaks into shards through the canopy. The air grows cooler, and the soft earth beneath your feet changes to a patchwork of mud and fallen leaves. Every step is measured. Too much noise, and the deer will vanish before you even glimpse them. You notice more signs, fresh droppings, still warm to the touch, a snapped twig with green sap oozing at the break, hoof prints overlapping in a way that suggests more than one animal. You motion to the group, signaling that the herd is moving slowly, maybe grazing. Halfway through the trees, you pause. A faint rustle ahead draws your attention. You lower yourself into a crouch, steadying your breath. Through a gap in the leaves, you catch sight of movement, light brown shapes shifting against the green. You can see the flick of an ear, the twitch of a tail. The leader holds up a hand, signaling everyone to freeze. The hunters begin to fan out silently. Two move to the left, disappearing into a dense thicket. Another circles right, using the trees as cover. You stay near the center, your job to keep sight of the herd's direction. A sudden gust of wind carries your scent forward, and one of the deer lifts its head. Its ears swivel, nostrils flaring. For a heartbeat, the world holds still. Then the leader steps forward, his arms snapping forward with the force of the throw. The spear arcs through the air, its stone tip flashing briefly before striking true. The deer stumbles and the rest of the herd bolts, the sound of their hooves like a drum roll fading into the distance. The hunters converge on the downed animal. You approach slowly, scanning the shadows in case the noise drew the attention of something else. Wolves, perhaps, or that big cat rumored to roam the outer plains. The deer's breath slows, then stops. You rest a hand on its flank briefly, feeling the warmth fade. There's no waste here. The hunters work quickly, stripping the hide, setting aside the best cuts, and preparing to carry the meat back. You help gather sinew for cordage, working the strands between your fingers. The smell is strong, iron and musk mixing with the damp air, and you breathe through your mouth to keep it from overwhelming you. As you stand, you notice an odd track nearby. Not deer, not human. The print is rounder, with claw marks faintly etched at the tips. You frown, pointing it out to the leader. He glances at it, then back toward camp. "We move," he says simply. Historians still debate whether early hunters considered themselves top predators, but moments like this remind you that you're never the only thing out here looking for food. The walk back is steady but quicker than before. You keep glancing over your shoulder, ears pricked for sounds that don't belong. The weight of the meat is balanced among the group, each carrying a share. The air feels heavier now, the mist thinning but the shadows between trees seeming darker. When you finally break into the open grassland and spot the smoke from campfires curling into the sky, relief washes through you. You've brought back food, yes, but also a warning, a sign that something else hunts nearby. Back at camp, the others greet the hunters with quiet pride. The meat is laid out, the hide set aside for cleaning later. The younger ones circle in, wide-eyed, asking questions about the chase. You keep your answers short, still replaying the image of that unfamiliar track in your mind. For now, the danger is distant, and the fire is warm. But out here, you know that nothing stays distant for long. The forest feels different when you're looking for plants instead of prey. Your pulse slows, your eyes widen, and you start noticing things the hunters stomp past without a second glance. After the deer is prepared and set for roasting, you find yourself drawn to the tree line again, this time with a smaller group. 2 women, both older than you, each carrying baskets woven from reeds. The goal now isn't meat. but the small treasures hidden in the undergrowth. The canopy overhead filters the sunlight into shifting pools of green and gold. You step lightly over gnarled roots, brushing aside ferns still beaded with last night's rain. A light breeze moves through the leaves, and somewhere above, a bird calls out a short, repetitive note, like it's marking your progress. You've always liked this part of the day, less adrenaline, more quiet focus. The first find comes from the eldest woman in your group. She crouches beside a patch of broad, waxy leaves and beckons you over. Beneath them, a clutch of mushrooms rests in a perfect circle, their caps pale and smooth. You crouch and inhale. The earthy scent is faint but distinct. She nods approval. These will roast nicely over the coals later, turning tender and nutty. Still, she reminds you with a wry smile that the wrong ones will roast you from the inside, and you're not entirely sure she's joking. Historians still argue whether such warnings were passed down from tragic mistakes or deliberate trial and error experiments, but either way, you take her seriously. A few steps further, you spot a vine coiled around a low branch, dotted with small, hard berries. Their dusty blue skins look inviting, but the second woman shakes her head sharply. "Bird food," she mutters. You watch as a finch flutters in, plucking one greedily. The berry's fate is sealed. You'll leave them to the creatures that can handle whatever bitterness or turmoil. Oxens they hold. The three of you wander deeper, the air growing cooler as the trees crowd closer. Your fingers trail along rough bark, feeling the grooves and ridges. You notice a scar on one trunk, a deep, clean cut that doesn't look like it came from an animal. You call the others over. The eldest woman squints at it, running her fingers along the smooth edge. She shrugs. Could have been a mark left seasons ago by another group. Could be nature too, but the neatness makes you think otherwise. Historians still argue whether such marks were territorial warnings or simply testing the sharpness of tools. Your own find comes in the form of a patch of green stalks near a stream. Their bases are thick, surrounded by mud, and when you pull one up, a bulbous root comes free, slick with water. You scrape a bit with your fingernail. The flesh beneath is crisp and white. You bite carefully, sweet, with a peppery edge. The others nod. This will store well if dried. You strip off the leaves and tuck the root into your basket. The stream itself is shallow but lively, water chuckling over smooth stones. You spot a flash of silver darting between them, a small fish. Not enough to bother with today, but a reminder that food moves in every layer of this world, above and below. The sound of running water mixes with the rustle of leaves and your own footsteps, the three blending into a low, steady rhythm. Then, something unexpected. You notice a faint golden sheen clinging to the underside of a nearby rock. When you lift it, you find a thick clump of sticky resin, its scent sharp and piney. You rub a bit between your fingers. It softens with warmth, almost like wax. The eldest woman smiles knowingly. Resin can patch holes in baskets, seal cracks in water gourds, and even be used as a kind of glue for fletching arrows. This is a lucky find. You wrap it in a leaf and tuck it away, like a secret. The baskets fill slowly, layer by layer, mushrooms cushioned by leaves, roots stacked neatly, handfuls of edible greens folded together. The air smells rich here, every step releasing the scent of crushed vegetation. You pass a tree buzzing faintly and spot a narrow slit in its bark where bees slip in and out. Honey. You eye it for a moment, tempted, but you know better than to pick a fight with an entire swarm this far from camp. On the way back, you pass under a gap in the canopy, sunlight spilling directly onto your face. It's warm, almost heavy, and it slows your steps. The other women are talking in low voices about seasons past, how certain plants only appear after long rains, how others signal the coming of storms. Their words drift like the light, soft, unhurried, but holding more weight than they seem to. By the time camp comes into view, your basket is a miniature map of the forest's generosity. The smell of roasting venison greets you first, rich and savory. You set your basket beside the growing pile of gathered food, feeling that quiet satisfaction of having added something useful to the day's survival. You glance back once toward the tree line. The forest stands still now, as if watching you go. Somewhere in there, more treasures wait, but for today you've taken enough. You drop your basket beside the communal pile, stretch your shoulders and drift toward a patch of open grass just beyond the camp. The midday sun has taken its position directly overhead, pressing a slow, drowsy heat onto your skin. The air has shifted. Less cool mist, more the kind of warmth that makes your limbs heavy and your thoughts soft. Someone calls your name, but it's not urgent, just a reminder to drink from the water gourd before you melt into the ground. You take a sip, the cool liquid sliding down with a faint taste of the clay vessel it's stored in. Your jaw cracks in an unplanned yawn, and you realize the weight in your eyelids isn't going to go away on its own. Midday rest isn't a luxury here, it's strategy. Energy is currency, and you can't afford to spend it all before the sun starts to dip. You wander toward a cluster of trees on the camp's edge, where shadows pool and the breeze slips more easily between trunks. There's a spot you've claimed in the past, a gentle dip in the ground beneath a tree whose roots rise like the ribs of some ancient animal. You lower yourself there, feeling the give of the earth under your weight. The grass is soft, still cool where it hides from the sun, and smells faintly sweet, like it's been brushed by wildflowers you can't see. You lie on your back, staring up at the patchwork of leaves above. They sway slowly, sending shifting patterns of light across your face. Somewhere nearby, someone hums a lazy tune, the melody curling into the air and dissolving before you can catch it fully. There's a sound here you love, one you don't hear in the rush of hunting or gathering. It's the quiet knock of branches, the occasional creak of wood, and the slow, steady sigh of wind moving through the treetops. It makes the world feel older, like the trees are breathing, and you're just lucky enough to be resting inside their lungs. Your stomach, partially full from the morning's finds, has stopped growling. You close your eyes, letting the sunlight warm your cheeks. Sleep doesn't take you all at once. It trickles in, the way water fills a hollow in the ground. You hover in that in-between space where thoughts drift in no clear order. A memory surfaces, sitting beside your grandmother, both of you watching a slow line of clouds crawl across the sky. She told you once that each cloud carried stories from the mountains to the sea, and if you watched long enough you might catch them forming shapes. You open your eyes again, staring up now to find one shaped vaguely like a mammoth, trunk raised, legs short like a child's drawing. Another resembles a spear, though its tip is already blurring apart. Historians still argue whether early humans had formal words for these moments, these small breaks between work. Was it rest, or was it simply another part of survival, staying still so you didn't draw attention, conserving your body's heat and strength? Whatever it was called, you feel it now, a slow unspooling of tension. A rustle draws your eyes to the right. It's only a pair of children weaving between trees, each carrying a long blade of grass like a sword. They whisper fiercely to each other, ducking behind a root before popping out to deliver a fatal poke. Their laughter is muffled, as if even their play respects the hush of midday. You shift slightly, rolling to one side. The roots beneath your hand are warm and the dirt clings to your skin. You run your fingers through it idly, feeling the grit and the occasional coolness of a buried stone. The scent of earth rises stronger here, mineral, deep, something that's been waiting far longer than you've been alive. A bird lands on a branch above, its head tilting this way and that. It hops once, twice, then gives a sharp call before fluttering off again. You follow it with your eyes until it disappears into the brightness beyond the shade. Your breathing slows to match the pace of the day. You're aware in a distant sort of way that there are still hours of work ahead. tools to sharpen, food to prepare, perhaps even a scouting trip before nightfall. But none of that feels urgent here. This is a pocket of time you can hold on to, one that makes the rest of the day more bearable. When you finally sit up, the sunlight has shifted and the air feels less heavy. You brush the dirt from your palms, noticing the faint imprint of roots on your skin. Your joints are looser now, your mind clearer. The world beyond the shade waits, full of noise and movement again. But for a short stretch of time, you were still, and in that stillness the day seemed to hold its breath with you. You wander from the cool shade toward the river you've been hearing all day, a steady hush like a giant animal sleeping with one eye open. The path dips, and the scent changes from warm grass to wet stone and green things that spend their lives half drowned. You crouch near the bank, toes curling into mud as slick as tallow, and scan the surface. Sunlit ripples skate past like silver threads. Beneath them, shapes flicker, quick, cautious, and always a fin's length away from your shadow. You reach into your pouch and pull out the rig you fussed over last season, a line twisted from sinew, stained a patient brown from smoke curing, and a small hook carved from bone, its barb shy but mean. It's a careful thing, this hook, shaped with the same stubborn attention you give to flint, and you can't help running your fingertip along it as if you're asking it to be kind. You lick the end of the line and thread it, your breath warm against the bone, and tie a knot you learned from a hunter who swears it never slips. He also swears he once lassoed a rabbit, which, between us, feels like the sort of story a rabbit would deny. You settle into a low crouch, one knee in the mud, one foot wedged against a root polished by centuries of high water. The resin you tucked away earlier comes to mind. Last night you warmed a pea-sized lump over embers to seal a frayed spot in the line. It held, a glossy bead nodding approval. Practical magic, that sticky gold. Your stomach gives a hopeful nudge as you pinch a morsel of mashed grub from the gourd, protein meeting destiny, and ease it onto the hook. With a slow breath, you let the lure kiss the current and slip into the darker ribbon near the bank. Time thins here. You become a collection of small calibrations, wrist angle, line tension, the patience to do nothing beautifully. A water strider cuts a clean V on the surface. A dragonfly hovers, due, illid and arrogant, as if checking your form. The trick is to keep your shadow off the water. You lean just so, letting the overhanging alder drape a curtain of shade. You've learned that fish sense more than sight, vibrations, changes in pressure, your heartbeat on a loud day. You exhale slowly, soft as ash. A nip, then nothing. Your mouth makes the smallest traitor's grin. You wait, pulse counting the stones. Another tug, firmer this time, like a question with teeth. You flick your wrist and feel the line go taut as a bowstring. The fish fights with a precise panic. Dart, lunge, pause, dart, and you draw it sideways rather than up, guiding it toward the pocket where the current dies behind a rock. Your hands work without hurry, coaxing, not yanking. When the fish breaks the surface, it flashes white belly and river-slick silver, and for an instant you see your own face warped in its glare, mud-etched, determined, very much alive. You land it with a quick scoop, palms careful around gills and hook. The bone barb comes free with a twist. The fish stills, then quiets further. You lay it on a damp leaf in the shade, a gift for tonight's coals. You whisper a thank you because someone once told you that kindness keeps the river honest. Also because talking nicely to dinner feels marginally less weird than arguing with it. Another lure, another patient drift. You remember an elder's claim that fish prefer hooks made from the leg bones of birds because they already know the shape of the sky. You've never proved that, but today your humble deerbone hook earns its keep. A second fish takes, then a third, smaller but graceful in your hands. You thread them through the gills with a willow switch and slide the stringer into a quiet pool, their tails fanning like prayer flags. Mainstream fact, straight and simple, early people all over the world crafted fish hooks from bone, shell, and wood. Some designs were barbless gorges, little spikes meant to lodge sideways in a fish's throat. You've seen a few in trade, tidy as thorns. Historians still argue whether your ancestors here leaned more on simple lines and hooks or on traps and woven nets, especially when the seasons changed and fish surged upriver like moving weather. You've helped with traps, rock weirs shaped like arrows, baskets that let eager fish in but not out, and they're efficient, communal, almost smug. But a line and hook gives you a private conversation with the river, and that feels right today. You test the current farther out, letting the lure skitter just at the seam where fast water meets slow. There's a confident pull, heavier than before. You lean back, forearms singing. The line holds, the resin patch does its tiny, crucial job, and you play the fish as if you're humming. It circles, tires, yields. When you bring it in, you notice a healed scar near its tail, a pale crescent like the moon chewed on it and lost interest. You run a thumb over it, imagining the near miss that left this souvenir. You're not the only one out here trying not to get eaten. The day's heat relaxes its grip as clouds collect like thoughtful boulders. A kingfisher rattles past and perches on a branch upstream, head cocked as if requesting a demonstration. You oblige with your most elegant cast and immediately snag a submerged stick. The bird laughs in kingfisher, which sounds suspiciously like someone popping dry seeds. You tug, the line frees, and you pretend that was all part of the show. Joke 1. You give the bird a bow so theatrical you nearly fall in. 10 out of 10 from the kingfisher, 5 from gravity. Between catches, you pick at a thought the elders like to toss around. Some people long ago. Crushed certain nuts or roots, plants with saponins or other unfriendly gifts, then released the mash in backwaters to stun fish. You've seen the demonstration once. Fish rising slow, not dead. Just suddenly very available. It's a fringe trick in your camp, used rarely and carefully because the river's generosity is a long bargain and nobody wants to be known as the person who negotiates with a club. Still, the knowledge sits on your shelf like a special tool. A family drifts down to the shallows, 2 kids ankle deep, a woman rinsing greens. She catches your eye and gestures toward your line with a question that is half blessing, half nosiness. You lift the willow stringer and the kids squeal, which is to say they stomp and splash until the river reminds them who invented slipping. You wave them back to safer stones, your best adult impression, which fools exactly no one but makes the woman smile. Joke 2. You declare the rock particularly bitey today, which earns you a solemn nod as if rocks everywhere are forming unions. Another fish, another careful unhook. The pile in shade grows to a respectable promise. You flex your wrist, feel the soft ache of work that belongs to you, and think about dinner. A bed of hot stones, a smear of rendered fat, maybe those mushrooms turned tender as secrets. If the healer approves, you'll sprinkle a pinch of crushed yellow flowers you gathered earlier, gentle on the stomach, friendly to the night. You swap to a shorter line to pluck from a narrow run near your feet. The precision calms your bones. You catch a small iridescent thing that looks painted by someone in love with rain. Too tiny for the coals. You slip it back, and it vanishes like it never happened. A breeze lifts the hair at your neck. Across the water, a heron lifts, folds its knees like complicated furniture, and slides away. Somewhere in your chest, a tiny no. T unties. For your final cast, you aim beneath a root ball gnawed hollow by spring floods. The lure disappears into shade, the line describes a perfect question mark, and the answer taps once, twice. You set, hold, wait, and bring in a broad, heavy fish that will anchor the evening. You grin, quietly of course, because you're cultivating a reputation for chill competence that is only occasionally ruined by triumph dancing. Joke 3. You offer the fish a deal. I'll cook you well if you don't embarrass me by tasting like swamp. And the river mercifully agrees. You rinse your hands, cold seeping into your wrists, and look at the world with the particular satisfaction of someone who asked for patience and was given dinner. The hook goes back into the pouch, the sinew line coiled with lazy precision. On the trudge uphill, your feet leave dark ovals on the damp path, each one briefly filling with water before the sun lifts it away. At camp, the fires breathe, the air carries venison and spice, and someone waves a strip of hide like a banner of small victories. You lift your stringer, and heads turn, not with shouting or spectacle, just that quiet updraft of morale that keeps a place human. You think about the rock weirs you'll rebuild after the next rains, about nets that might need mending, about the bone hook that did good work today and will sleep in ash tonight. Warm and proud. Historians still argue whether people like you fished to fill occasional gaps or as a core rhythm of the year. Your answer right now looks like a coil of line and a full belly waiting. By the time the fish are cleaned and laid on green leaves beside the fire, the camp has slipped into that late afternoon hum, a mix of work, chatter, and the low background music of crackling wood. You wander toward the sound of laughter and rhythmic scraping where a circle of people sits beneath a leaning willow. This is the camp's chore zone, though chore is too small a word for the quiet engine that keeps life turning. You drop to a crouch beside a woman pulling a hide taut over a smooth log. Her hands are quick, the stone scraper in her grip flashing like a pale wing as it slides under stubborn sinew. A thin curl of flesh peels away and she flicks it into the dirt without looking. You remember your first hide, how your wrists ached, how your fingers went numb, how the smell of raw skin seemed to live in your hair for days. The trick, you've learned, is rhythm, not force. She hums under her breath, keeping time as she works. Beside her, a young man twists fibers between his palms, rolling them on his thigh to make cord. The plant strands darken and tighten under the motion, a slow braid of strength. You pick up a few strips yourself and join in. The repetition is almost hypnotic. Roll, pinch, shift, roll again. The cord will become a snare, or a tie for a spear point, or maybe a strap for a water gourd. Everything here has 3 lives before it dies. Across the circle, someone sharpens a flint knife against a flat stone. The scrape is steady, punctuated by short bursts of conversation. You catch snippets, someone complaining about a burnt tuber, another person claiming they saw a strange light in the hills last night. Historians still argue whether such lights were natural events, like fireflies or lightning, or if they were the spark for myths that travelled in every direction. Whatever they were, you file the story away for tonight's fire. And then there's the gossip, because no matter how old the world is, people still love to talk. You hear a sly comment about who took the biggest share of venison, followed by a snort of laughter. Someone suggests that the mysterious burnt tuber was actually an offering to the fire spirits. Another voice, older, amused, cuts in to remind them that the last time someone tried feeding the fire spirits, it rained for 3 days. You add your own joke. Maybe the spirits were just thirsty. It earns a ripple of chuckles, the kind that softens shoulders. Joke 1. Spirits with bad timing are apparently a universal problem. One of the children darts in to deliver a bundle of thin sticks for kindling, dumping them in a haphazard pile. His face is smeared with ash, and he's clearly been playing near the smaller cooking fire. He proudly announces he's helping with the important jobs, and someone rewards him with a berry that stains his lips purple. You watch him sprint off again, the bundle of energy undoing all your careful, cord-rolling calm. The air smells of tanning smoke, sharp, woody, clinging to skin and hair. You shift closer to the hide worker to watch her thread a strip of sinew through a bone needle. The motion is practiced, her fingers knowing exactly how far to push before the bone point catches. The hole widens under her pull, and she knots the stitch with a small jerk of her wrist. That piece of hide will be part of a cloak by the end of the season, warm enough to hold off the cold wind that rattles through the valley in winter. As you work, you notice the light shifting toward gold, the long shadows stretching across camp. Someone tosses a handful of herbs onto the fire, and the smoke changes character. Less biting, more fragrant, with a sweetness that hangs in the air. It seeps into your clothes, into your hair, into the memory of this hour. Mainstream fact: archaeological digs have found campsites with clear evidence of these work circles. Stone tools, worked hides, plant fibers, pigment stains, all clustered together. It suggests not just survival, but community, a rhythm of cooperation that kept everyone alive. Historians still argue whether tasks were divided strictly by role or if people floated between jobs as needed. Today, you float, and no one seems to mind. A man across the circle holds up a finished cord, testing its strength by pulling until his knuckles whiten. Satisfied, he tosses it to you, and you feel the faint give in the twist. You loop it around your wrist, already thinking of where it could be used. Joke 2, you tell him it's perfect for tying shut the mouths of people who complain about burnt tubers. This gets you a louder laugh, and someone throws you a withered berry in mock retaliation. Before long, the piles of work grow, neatly scraped hides folded at the edges of the circle, coiled cord stacked in small bundles, sharpened tools laid out for inspection. There's no applause, no ceremony. Just a mutual glance, a shared acknowledgement that the camp is better off now than it was an hour ago. The sun edges lower, and the circle begins to dissolve. People drift toward the main fire, carrying their finished work, voices mingling with the smell of cooking meat. You stretch your legs, rolling your shoulders, and slip the new cord into your pouch. As you walk away, you catch one last comment from the gossip chain. If the fire spirits want another tuber, they'll have to dig it up themselves. Joke 3, you mutter, good luck with that, they've got no hands. And someone snorts behind you. The sound follows you all the way to the fire. You slide into the growing ring around the fire, drawn by a sound older than the stones beneath your feet, the cadence of a story being told. The elder sits cross-legged, back straight, hands resting loosely on his knees. His hair catches the firelight like frayed rope, and the wrinkles in his face hold the kind of maps no one can draw anymore. His voice moves slow and steady, like a river working its way through stone, and the group leans in just enough to be caught. You catch the thread mid-weave. A giant bird, wings wider than the longest spear, shadowing a hunting party so large it blocked the sun. Some in the circle nod knowingly, as if they've seen it too. Others smirk, their faces hiding questions under polite interest. The elder's eyes sweep across them all, pausing just long enough on each to make you wonder if he's measuring belief or testing patience. The details come rich, feathers black as the inside of a cave, talons that could scoop up a deer without breaking stride. He says its call was like a storm shouting at the ground, and you can almost hear it in the way he draws out the words. Mainstream fact: there are cave paintings in some parts of the world showing birds far larger than anything alive today. Historians still argue whether they're depictions of real prehistoric giants or simply exaggerations meant to impress. Sitting here, you're not entirely sure where that line is. The fire throws shadows against the nearest hide wall, and in them the elder's hands become wings. He spreads them slowly, and the light turns them into shapes that flicker, disappear, then return, bigger each time. Children at the front inch closer, wide-eyed, their small hands curling into their laps. You remember being their size, trying to decide if the creatures in these stories were warnings, entertainment, or just the world dressed in feathers for the night. Halfway to Prue, the elder drops in a detail that makes the adults exchange quick glances. The bird carried shiny stones in its beak and left them at the base of certain cliffs. Some say it was marking territory, others that it was trading in its own way. You can almost hear the quiet spark this idea lights in people's heads, imagining treasure chests in the wild, waiting for a lucky finder. Joke 1. You lean toward the man beside you and whisper, "Maybe it's just building a nest with better decor." He chokes on a laugh and earns a glare from the elder, who somehow still keeps the story rolling. The tale winds toward its ending. A hunter who dared to follow the bird's shadow for days until it vanished into clouds, never to be seen again. The elder pauses here, letting the weight of never settle. In the silence, the fire pops, a coal shifts, and someone coughs. Then, with a slow smile, he adds, "But the stones still appear if you know where to look." There's a collective exhale, and a murmur ripples through the circle. Some people clearly want to press for details. Others just stare into the flames, lost in private visions. You find yourself wondering which nearby cliffs you've overlooked in your wanderings, which shadows might be more than tricks of light. The elder's gaze lands on you briefly, and you feel a jolt, like he's passed the thread to you without words. That's how these stories travel. In glances, pauses, the unspoken dare to carry them forward. He shifts then, letting the moment breathe, and begins another tale, this one about a man who could speak to wolves. His tone changes, lighter now, as if knowing the group needs to exhale after the weight of the first. The children giggle at the image of wolves sitting politely in a circle to hear a bedtime story of their own. Joke 2, you murmur, "Bet they complained about burnt tubers too," which gets you a discreet elbow in the ribs. Mainstream fact, stories weren't just for entertainment, they carried maps, survival tips, moral codes. The bird nests near cliffs might be code for "there's something useful at those cliffs." The wolf who listens might hide advice about approaching predators carefully. Historians still argue whether myths began as coded instructions or as pure flights of imagination. Tonight, you suspect they've always been both. The second tale ends with a soft punchline that earns a mix of chuckles and eye rolls. The elder leans back, hands on his knees, and tilts his head toward the sky. The rest of the group follows his gaze. Through a break in the smoke, stars prick the dark like scattered embers. It's an unspoken cue. The story circle will dissolve soon, but the mood will linger like the aftertaste of strong herbs. Joke 3, you say, "If the bird comes back tonight, tell it to bring kindling," which earns a few sleepy grins. The elder doesn't even look at you, but you catch the tiniest twitch of his mouth in the firelight. The circle breaks slowly. People stretch, tend the fire, or wander toward the cooking pits. You remain seated for a moment longer, the image of wings fading but not gone. Somewhere in the night, there's space for both truth and feathers, and you're not in a hurry to separate them. The first thing you notice is the shift in the air. It's subtle, cooler, tighter somehow, and when you follow the angle of a few wary glances, you see him. A lone figure at the far edge of the clearing, just inside the reach of the shadows. He stands still, a little too still, clutching something in one hand that glints when the firelight hits it. The chatter around the fire thins as if everyone agreed without speaking to keep their voices low. The elder's gaze lingers on the stranger, but he doesn't call out. Instead, The hunters, still holding half-cleaned tools, ease their hands towards spear shafts lying nearby. You shift your weight and take in the details. He's not dressed like anyone from camp. His furs are patched together in a different style, the seams rough and uneven. His hair hangs in thick ropes bound by strips of hide. And that shiny thing, hard to tell from here, but it could be a polished stone or a blade. Either way, it's the kind of object that carries meaning. Historians still argue whether items like that served as currency, badges of rank, or just personal trophies. A faint memory stirs. Last season, a pair of strangers arrived with smoked fish to trade. They left with cord and flint, but also left behind a sense that they'd been measuring the camp as much as you'd been measuring them. You wonder if this man's alone, or if more eyes are in the dark just beyond the firelight. The leader steps forward, not aggressive, not welcoming, just marking himself as the first line between stranger and camp. The man doesn't move. He glances around, and for the briefest moment, his gaze passes over you. It's quick, but enough to make you feel like he's filing your face away somewhere important. Joke 1. Under your breath, you mutter to the person beside you, he's either lost or he's about to sell us a miracle root. The tension is too high for more than a tiny smirk in response, but it loosens your jaw a little. After a long pause, the stranger takes a single step forward, holding the shiny object out at arm's length. The firelight catches it fully now, a stone blade, but unlike any you've seen. The surface shimmers with colours that shift when he tilts it. Green, gold, and something like oil on water. Murmurs ripple through the group. Some lean in, others lean back. He says something then, a low, deliberate phrase in a tongue you don't quite know but almost recognise. You catch pieces, enough to think it might be about trade, or perhaps warning. The leader answers in your own language, slow and measured, keeping his palms open at his sides. They go back and forth like that for a few exchanges, the stranger's voice carrying a rough rhythm. Finally, he takes another step forward and sets the blade on the ground. Then, with a small nod, he backs away, just enough to show he's waiting for a choice to be made. The leader picks up the blade, turning it in his hands. The craftsmanship is undeniable. Edges so fine you can't help but think of how easily they'd part hide or meat. Mainstream fact, certain volcanic stones, like obsidian, can be knapped to edges sharper than modern steel, and some archaeological finds show they travelled hundreds of miles through ancient trade routes. Historians still argue whether such long-distance exchanges were occasional strokes of luck or part of organised networks. The decision comes in a quiet word from the leader: food. Two hunters bring forward strips of roasted venison and a small pouch of dried berries. The stranger steps forward just enough to take them, his movements careful, as if aware that every inch he closes is being measured. He glances around once more, this time letting his gaze rest a little longer on the fire. Then he turns and walks back into the dark, the sound of his steps swallowed quickly by the night. No one speaks until the last hint of movement disappears between the trees. You lean toward your neighbour and whisper, "Well, at least it wasn't a miracle root." Joke 2. The response comes dry and low. Or maybe it was, and we'll find out in the morning. There's a strange aftertaste to the moment. The blade lies on a flat rock near the fire now, catching the light in those same shifting colours. It feels like more than a tool. It feels like a mark, a story in the making. You can already imagine the gossip tomorrow. Some will say he was alone, others that you saw the first of many. For now, the fire circle breathes again. Someone passes you a piece of meat, and the warmth in your hands feels sharper somehow, like you're aware of every edge in camp tonight. Joke 3. You tell the nearest hunter, "If someone else shows up with glowing eyes, I'm hiding behind you." He grins without looking up from his food, and the night moves forward, carrying the stranger with it into its deep, silent folds. The next morning, the memory of the stranger is still prickling at the edges of camp conversation, but today's task pushes it aside. The hare trails in the grasslands beyond the ridge are fresh, and your stomach doesn't care about mysterious gifts. It cares about dinner. You sling your new flint blade at your hip, tuck a few smooth throwing stones into your pouch, and follow the hunting path out of camp. The grass beyond the ridge is waist-high and pale gold in the morning light, swaying in a slow wave with each breeze. You step carefully, your feet sinking slightly into the soft earth. The air here smells sharper, dry grass, warm soil, and the faint musk of the animals that live in it. Every so often you pause, squatting low to scan the ground. There it is. A faint tunnel through the grass, no wider than your wrist, leading toward a small mound of dirt. You kneel to inspect it, running your fingers along the edges. The prints are tiny, the soil freshly disturbed. Mainstream fact: hares leave distinct tracks with their large back feet landing ahead of the smaller front ones, a pattern hunters have recognized for thousands of years. Historians still argue whether ancient people hunted them primarily for food or for their fur, prized for warmth in colder seasons. You follow the trail, moving slowly, each step placed to keep from rustling the grass too loudly. The sun is higher now, warming the top of your head while the air beneath the grass stays cool and damp. You spot another sign, a small dropping, fresh enough to still shine faintly. You smirk. Hares are tidy in their habits, and this one isn't far. The mound ahead catches your attention. It's the entrance to a shallow burrow, the grass around it bent in a way that suggests frequent comings and goings. You lower yourself to your stomach, pressing your cheek against the cool earth, and peer through the stems. At first, nothing. Then, a twitch of fur, a flicker of movement. The hare's ears rotate, scanning the air for sound. You reach slowly into your pouch for one of the smooth stones. The trick is patience. Too fast and the stone will miss entirely. Too slow and the hare will vanish into the burrow. You inhale, hold it, and then with a sharp flick of your wrist, send the stone skimming just in front of the animal. It startles, springing sideways into the open. That's the moment you're waiting for. You're already up, legs pumping, closing the distance. Hare hunting is a game of bursts, short, intense chases where the world narrows to the rhythm of your breath and the sight of moving fur. You angle yourself to cut it off from the nearest thicket, forcing it toward a patch of open ground. The hare zigzags, its speed ridiculous for its size, but the stones in your pouch rattle like a quiet promise. You take another shot, the stone glancing off the ground just ahead of it. The hare veers again, straight toward a shallow dip where the grass is thinner. You dive forward, arms out, and your hands close around its hind legs. It kicks, powerful even in panic, but you hold tight, murmuring nonsense under your breath until it stills. You stand, breathing hard, and brush the dirt from your arms. The hare is warm and tense in your grip, its sides heaving. You give it a quick, efficient end, then smooth the fur as a small gesture of respect. Joke 1. You glance around the empty grassland and say aloud, "That's right, I'm the fastest thing out here," for about 20 seconds. The walk back is slower. You take a different route, scanning for more signs, burrows, tracks, droppings, but nothing fresh enough to chase. A hawk circles overhead, its shadow gliding over the grass. You wonder if it's sizing you up the same way you size up hares. Near the ridge, you pause to take in the view. From here, the camp is a scatter of shapes and smoke, the river a silver thread beyond. You shift the hare to your other hand, feeling the small weight as both trophy and meal. Mainstream fact: small game hunting like this often filled the gaps between larger kills, ensuring steady food without the risks of big hunts. Historians still argue whether it was considered lesser work or if the skill it required gave it equal standing in the group. After today's sprint, you're leaning toward the latter. Your legs still hum with the chase. Back at camp, you hand the hare to the cook, who raises an eyebrow and says, "Only one?" You shrug and tell her it was a competitive hare. Joke 2. You add, "It challenged me to a race. I won, but barely." The pelt will be cleaned later, maybe turned into a warm lining for a pouch or a trim for a hood. The meat will join the day's stew, its flavour richer for the effort it took to bring it here. You settle by the fire, legs stretched, letting the heat soak into the muscles that just earned their rest. Joke 3. To the nearest hunter you say, "If anyone asks, tell them I chased it all the way from the mountains." He nods solemnly, clearly planning to embellish it even more. The hare's gone to the pot, but the rush of the hunt lingers, a reminder that in this world, sometimes victory is as small and quick as the flick of a furred ear in the grass. The hare's scent still lingers in the air when you wander toward the rock overhang at the far side of camp, the one with the broad, flat wall that's been slowly turning into a patchwork of ochre, charcoal, and the occasional smear of something unidentifiable but intriguing. A few others are already there, crouched or kneeling, their hands busy grinding pigment or sketching lines into the stone with the focus of people building a doorway into memory. You drop to a squat beside a shallow bowl where red ochre dust piles in a little mound. The pigment's grainy under your fingertips, staining them in an instant. Beside it, a smaller bowl holds powdered charcoal, its blackness so deep it seems to swallow the light. You've used these before, mixed with water, spit, or animal fat to make them cling to the rock. Mainstream fact: pigments like ochre have been used for tens of thousands of years, found in sites from Africa to Europe to Australia. Historians still argue whether they were primarily for art, ritual, or even practical uses, like insect repellent or sunscreen. You once heard a half-joking claim that a smear of ochre kept the biting flies away. You tried it once, but the flies just seemed to think you were seasoning yourself. Today, you decide to go for something ambitious. You start with a rough outline of a mammoth, because frankly, everyone loves a good mammoth, but yours immediately looks like a lumpy potato on stilts. The woman next to you leans over and squints at it. "Interesting," she says, which you know is the polite version of, "I hope that's not finished." You laugh and start again, this time paying more attention to the gentle slope of the back, the small head, the thick legs. You use charcoal for the outline, then dip a stick into the ochre mix and shade the bulk of the body, letting the grainy red cling unevenly for texture. You step back, tilt your head, and decide it's passable. Joke 1, you point to it and tell the nearest onlooker it's a mammoth in winter, extra fluffy. Others are working on their own visions. One man sketches a hunt scene, tiny figures with spears chasing a deer that's mid-leap. Another uses a smear of yellowish clay to create the outline of a bird with an exaggeratedly long beak. A child crouches lower down, dragging a finger through wet charcoal in loose spirals. You decide to try something less literal next, a handprint. You coat your palm in the ochre paste, press it flat against the wall, then lift away to reveal a vivid red mark. It's simple, but it feels personal, like leaving a piece of yourself here. You notice your handprint overlaps faintly with one already there, a faded one that might be seasons or years old. Nearby, a young girl experiments with blowing pigment through a hollow bone to create a sprayed effect. You watch as the red mist blooms across the rock, settling into a shape like the sun caught in a net. The spray drifts in the air for a moment and you catch the metallic tang of the ochre in your nose. Someone produces a lump of pale stone, grinding it against the wall to leave faint white streaks. You try it yourself, adding a line beneath your mammoth that could be ground, snow, or perhaps a river. It changes the whole image, suddenly giving your potato-shaped beast a place to stand. Mainstream fact: some of these pigments have lasted tens of thousands of years in caves protected from wind and sun. Historians still argue whether certain recurring shapes, spirals, zigzags, dots, were purely decorative or had meanings now lost. You catch yourself tracing one of these zigzags absent-mindedly, wondering if the person who made it sat in this exact spot with the same smell of wet pigment in their nose. You make one last addition, a small, deliberate scratch near the mammoth's trunk. To anyone else it might look like a random mark, but you decide it's a signifier, your own private flourish. Joke 2. You tell the woman beside you it's the mammoth's signature, and she just shakes her head, muttering something about artists. The sun shifts, sending a fresh angle of light across the wall. The pigments glow faintly, the reds deepening, the blacks settling into the stone like they've always been there. There's a moment where everyone steps back in unspoken agreement just to take it in, the wall alive with motion, frozen in pigment. Before you leave, you rinse your hands in a nearby gourd of water. The ochre lingers in the creases of your skin, stubborn and warm-toned. You like that it will stay for a while, a reminder that you left something behind that might outlast even the stories. Joke 3. As you walk away, you call over your shoulder, "If my mammoth's still here in 1,000 seasons, tell them it was supposed to look like that." The laughter that follows you feels as permanent as the wall itself. The first warning is the smell, wet stone and crushed leaves, arriving before the clouds bully the blue out of the sky. You're halfway between the rock wall and the cooking fire when a cool tongue of wind licks the back of your neck. You look up. The light has gone pewter. The willow fronds tremble as if whispering to each other, and the birds agree on a collective, uneasy silence. You've learned to read that silence. It says, "Find cover or get rinsed like a dropped gourd." You move quickly, calling to anyone still out in the open. A few heads turn, someone shouts for the children. A basket of fiber cord vanishes under an arm. The first drops are fat, exploratory, plop, plop, darkening dust in coins. You drag a rolled hide toward the lean-to, flicking it open with a practiced snap. The air is suddenly colder, as if the sky opened a doorway to some shaded ravine and invited it in. Then the rain commits. Sheets of it stumble sideways, driven by a gust that makes the fire groan and crouch low. You and 2 others hunch over the nearest flame, building its walls higher with damp stones, coaxing it from panic to stubbornness. Steam hisses up like a scolded snake. You throw a handful of dry twigs into the heart and shield it with your body until the orange steadies to a pulse rather than a scream. Across the clearing, puddles sketch themselves in fast handwriting. You hustle to lift food baskets onto stones, tilt water gourds so their mouths face downwind, and haul a half-finished hide under the overhang. A child skitters past with arms out like a wind-ruffled crow, laughing until a cold river finds the back of their neck, then shrieking with theatrical betrayal. Joke 1. You tell them, "Congratulations, you've invented sky soup," which earns a soggy grin. There's a rhythm to storm work you could do in your sleep. Secure the roof ties, dig a quick channel to tempt water away. From the sleeping mats, prop the lowest edge of a hide so air can pass and keep it from moulding later. You grab a rib bone scraper and carve a shallow trench at the shelter's lip, the mud yielding in pleasing curls. It's messy, efficient, and more art than anyone admits. Under the lean-to, the world looks like it's underwater. Sheets of rain blur the tree line. Drops explode on puddles like pale sparks. You hang a small charm, a loop of willow with a twist of sinew, at the shelter edge to distract the wind. Does it help? Maybe. Does it make people feel like the wind can be bargained with? Definitely. Quirky tidbit. Someone swears that tucking a sprig of pungent herb into roof lashings teaches the storm manners. You tuck one in anyway. A polite storm is better than the other kind. You check on the paint wall. The new mammoth, yes, the fluffy one, sits dry under its rock lip, the red ochre darkened to wine. A thread of runoff creeps near the base. You drag a log to shunt the trickle away, pat the stone like an old friend, and promise not to let the rain edit your art. Mainstream fact: in many regions, sudden downpours shaped daily life. Seasonal monsoons flooding low ground, flash storms carving gullies in hours. People learn to site camps on slightly higher ground, to slope sleeping areas to keep tinder in dry bundles wrapped with hide. Your camp's tinder bundle, bark curls, feather-dry grass, a jealous secret, lives in a basket lined with resin you found earlier, and today it earns its keep. The storm intensifies, drumming the hide roof with 1,000 quick fingers. You huddle in, shoulders nearly touching, sharing the particular intimacy of people waiting out something big with nothing but patience and joint body heat. Steam rises from your hair. Someone passes a gourd. You pass it along. The circle breathes in unison. Historians still argue whether shelters like ours, tilted hides, woven mats, low walls, were for single families or larger clusters rotating space. Looking at the elbows you're wearing as neighbors, you vote for whoever fits. A crack of thunder rearranges everyone's spine. A toddler dives into a pile of skins and emerges with an expression that says the sky needs a nap. The elder, calm as always, hums a stretch of song that people know without admitting it, a long, low, looping thing meant to give time a softer edge. You find yourself sinking to it, your breath riding the melody. Joke too, you mutter that the thunder is just the mountain rolling over. Someone whispers back, tell it to roll quieter. Outside, the world is all motion. Rain carving rivulets that braid and unbraid, the willow's strands slapping like wet rope, the fire's top licking sideways to catch air. You step into the curtain of water to adjust the windbreak, and the cold is so sudden you gasp a little. Your tunic clings heavy as a wet promise. You wedge a thicker branch against a post, tighten the fiber tie, and smear a thumb of resin over the knot to repel the drip. The resin gleams like honey and then dulls as the rain worries at it without success. Lightning flares, burnt sugar white. Then the delayed boom arrives from the ridge. Somewhere in your chest, an older memory wakes. A storm day when you were small, watching rain bounce off the dirt like a million tiny dancers. Your grandmother telling you that storms scrub the world so it can be used again. You believed her because everything she said sounded like a stone you could step on. You steal a glance at the flood line you carved. It holds, barely. The channel shoulders the water around sleeping mats and into a new, temporary creek that makes for the camp's low corner. 2 kids have turned it into a ship road, launching leaf boats that lurch, spin, and then execute surprise landings against your ankle. You award points with imperial seriousness. The thunder serves as judge's gavel. Inside the shelter, people get practical. Someone strings a line near the peak to hang wet cloaks. Someone else spreads a perforated rack near the fire's safer side for mushrooms to dry later. You rub your hands, feeling heat return to your knuckles in slow sparks. Warmth moves from bone outward like a rescue mission. Another gust rattles the roof lashings. You and a hunter trade spots without speaking. He checks the posts. You check the tinder bundle. Everything that can be saved is saved. The soup pot, today a democracy of hair scraps, greens and proud fish flakes, simmers valiantly, lid weighted by a smooth stone. The smell fights the damp and wins. You lift the corner to peek and get a faceful of fragrant breath. It tastes like patience. Mainstream fact: some groups used sloped stone pavements or packed clay floors to keep interiors dry. Others raised sleeping platforms on woven frames. You nudge a mat onto a trio of stout branches, giving it a breath of elevation. Historians still argue whether such cleverness was everyday know-how or the specialty of certain craft-minded folks. In your camp, smart ideas migrate until they belong to everyone. Then, like a door closing gently, the rain lightens. The drumming turns to tapping, tapping to the occasional polite knock. The clouds pull their hems up and shuffle down valley, trailing a silvery veil. The air behind them is new, washed, green, with that metallic tang storms leave as a signature. You step out, feet sinking into a plush carpet of renewed grass. Every leaf carries a jewel. The world looks freshly invented. You walk the perimeter to check for surprises the water might have delivered. A fallen limb near the storage pit, moved. A shallow slide of earth at the far edge, noted. A frog, fat and gloriously unconcerned, occupies the trench you carved like a reserved seat. Joke 3. You bow and apologize for disturbing the noble canal engineer. The frog blinks, which you interpret as proceed. At the paint wall, the mammoth has dried to a deeper, kinder red. Your little scratch survives. You touch the cool stone with just your fingertips, a quiet greeting. Beyond, the river runs quicker, blue-grey with excitement, and the kingfisher you embarrassed earlier rattles past like a gossip who finally got good material. By the time you circle back, the camp is already resetting to its usual tempo. Cloaks steam, the soup tastes thunderproof, and people swap storm stories that somehow happened only minutes ago but have already grown footnotes. You sit, letting the last drops abandon your hair, and feel the day slide back onto its rails. The storm didn't ask permission, it never does, but you met it with trenches, ties, resin, and the stubborn little fire that refused to lie down. The sky can keep its drama. You'll keep your dry sleeping mat. The storm's memory still clings to the camp when the sun dips low, but now the fire is king again, steady, proud and hungry. The smell hits you before you even reach the circle. Roasted venison, rich and smoky, braided with the earthy perfume of mushrooms gathered earlier. Your stomach tightens like it's applauding. The cooks work in a loose rhythm, tending spits balanced over glowing coals. A fat strip of meat crackles as it turns, dripping juice that flares briefly into flame. One woman crouches near the heat, sprinkling crushed herbs from a woven pouch. The scent blooms immediately, sharp, green, and a little wild, like the forest leaned in to season the meal itself. You grab a flat stone from the edge of the fire pit and set it in the coals to heat, thinking of the fish you caught earlier. Laid across the hot surface, their skins hiss, curling slightly at the edges. You press them with a stick, listening to the faint sizzle as fat begins to render. Mainstream fact: cooking on hot stones is as old as fire use itself, a method found in sites across continents. Historians still argue whether it began as a deliberate innovation or a happy accident when someone dropped food onto a flat rock near the flames. The air is thick with smells now: meat, fish, mushrooms, the sweet note of roots buried under embers to roast in their own skins. Someone adds strips of tuber to a pot already brimming with greens and chunks of hair from the morning. The broth pops with the occasional bubble, sending up a steam you can taste just by leaning close. You tear into a piece of venison offered on a skewer. It's smoky, tender, with that faint metallic tang that comes from fresh game. You chew slowly, letting the heat spread from your tongue to your chest. Beside you, a child carefully turns a smaller skewer, his face set with the seriousness of someone guarding treasure. Joke 1. You long. Ian over and whisper, if you blink, the fire spirits will eat it first. His eyes widen, and he doesn't look away again until it's cooked. There's a soft undercurrent of talk around the fire. People swap the day's small victories: roots found, tools sharpened, a trench that actually held during the storm. The laughter comes easy now, helped along by full bellies in the making. Someone passes you a gourd of fermented drink, tart and fizzy on your tongue. It sends a warm bloom to your cheeks. You offer a bite of fish in return, the skin crisp, the flesh flaking apart in clean layers. The person grins, juice running down their chin. Better than the last batch, they say, and you accept the compliment as if you'd invented fire. Mainstream fact, communal meals like this did more than fill stomachs. They reinforced bonds, gave space for sharing news, and even helped settle disputes. Historians still argue whether such gatherings were planned events or simply happened whenever the hunt was good. Tonight, it feels deliberate, a quiet celebration of surviving another day with more than enough to eat. You notice the elder has taken his place by the biggest pot, ladling generous portions into clay bowls. He hands you one, heavy and fragrant. Inside, chunks of hair, fish and root swim together in a broth so rich it seems to hug your tongue. You sip, and it's the taste of the whole day condensed: river, grassland, forest, fire. Joke 2. You remark to the elder, "If this doesn't make us run faster tomorrow, I'm blaming the tubers." He just smirks and takes another sip from his own bowl. Children weave between the seated adults, delivering bowls and sometimes sneaking bites. A girl offers you a mushroom, still steaming from its skewering. You bite, and the nutty flavor fills your mouth, mingling with the broth's richness. The memory of foraging for it earlier makes the taste even better. It's not just food, it's a story you helped write. As the meal goes on, the talk drifts to tomorrow's plans: where to hunt, who will fish, who will check the berry thickets. Someone suggests smoking extra meat for trade, and the idea gains quick agreement. Another voice mentions keeping watch for the stranger's return. The mood shifts for a heartbeat, but the fire's warmth pulls it back toward comfort. Mainstream fact: in some communities, certain foods were reserved for specific people: elders, hunters, children. Historians still argue whether this was about nutrition, hierarchy, or both. Tonight there's no division. Everyone eats from the same pots, the same skewers. It's a small kind of equality that feels bigger in the glow of firelight. When you've eaten enough to feel heavy, you lean back on your elbows, watching sparks rise into the night. The fire pops, sending a brief comet of ember into the air before it fades. Someone begins humming, low and tuneful, and a few others join in. It's not a song with words, just a shared sound that fits the moment. Joke 3. You close your eyes and say, "If the food tastes this good tomorrow, I'll believe in fire spirits after all." The laughter that answers you is warm enough to rival the flames. You set your empty bowl aside, belly full, skin warm, and the world reduced to the simple math of good food, good company, and a night with no immediate danger pressing at its edges. The fire's heat still lingers on your skin when the faint call of a horn sounds from beyond the camp. It's not alarm, it's the soft, rolling note used for visitors. Heads lift, conversations stall mid-sentence. Out of the dark beyond the tree line, shapes emerge. 4 figures, each with a load slung across their backs. The glow of the fire catches on beads, shells, and the flash of polished stone. They're from a neighbouring group you've met only a handful of times before. Last time they brought smoked fish and left with cordage and 2 fine flint scrapers. Tonight they arrive with wide, easy grins, the kind you bring when you know your hands are full of good bargaining chips. As they step into the firelight, you see their offerings: a bundle of river shells strung in tight spirals, a rolled pelt so clean it almost gleams, and a pouch that clinks softly, stone beads maybe, or bone carvings. Mainstream fact: trade among early groups wasn't just about goods. It was about information, alliances, and sometimes finding a safe place to stay. Historians still argue whether these exchanges were formal, with agreed rules, or fluid, adapting to the moment and relationship. Your leader greets them with a nod and gestures for them to join the fire's edge. They drop their bundles gently, then sit cross-legged, warming their hands while scanning the circle. That's part of the ritual. You show your goods, you look at theirs, you share heat before you talk trade. One of your hunters brings forward a shallow basket filled with tonight's extra food. Strips of roasted venison, smoked fish, and tubers still wrapped in their ember-baked skins. The visitors accept, biting into the fish with satisfied murmurs. It's a small gift to set the tone. You watch as the leader unfolds the pelt. It's soft, supple, smelling faintly of resin, perfect for winter cloaks or a sleeping mat. The shell straw. Ends catch the light, shimmering like bits of frozen water. The pouch, when opened, spills bone beads carved into spirals and animal shapes. Some are simple, others are so fine you have to squint to see the tiny grooves cut into them. Joke 1. Under your breath you mutter to the person beside you, "If we trade for those, I'm wearing them all at once so everyone knows who really won." The bargaining begins. Your leader points to the pelt, offers 2 flint blades and a coil of sinew cord. The visitor shakes his head lightly, tapping 2 fingers on the pelt, and then pointing at the beaded shells as well. The dance has started. Offers, counters, pauses to eat, laughter to soften refusals. You're handed the shell strands to inspect. They're cool against your palms, the tiny holes drilled with such precision you imagine the patience it took. Mainstream fact, beads like these have been found in archaeological sites thousands of years old, often far from the coast, proving they travelled long distances in trade. Historians still argue whether they were pure decoration or carried symbolic meaning tied to status, identity, or even clan membership. Eventually, the deals take shape. The pelt for a bundle of sinew cord, 3 blades, and a small pouch of dried berries. The shells for 2 decorated spear shafts and a gourd of honey. The beads, after more back and forth than anything else, go in exchange for the resin you collected earlier and a promise of smoked meat after the next big hunt. The goods are exchanged openly, each side taking a moment to inspect their new treasures. No one rushes this part. It's a show of respect, making sure the quality is exactly what was promised. When the visitors nod in satisfaction, the tension eases. The talk shifts then, as it always does, to news. They mention fresh deer tracks by the northern river bend, the way the grass there has been flattened by large herds. They warn of a section of cliffside that gave way during the last rain, good flint there before, now dangerous to approach. They share word of another group farther east, one you've never met, who carry spears tipped with a kind of stone none of you have seen before. Joke 2. You whisper to your neighbour, "Next time I'm just going to trade for their gossip. It's the best thing they bring." There's also talk of weather, how the winds have been shifting earlier than expected, how the moon's position seems to be changing faster this season. Historians still argue whether such observations counted as early astronomy or simply pattern watching for survival. Either way, you tuck the details away. As the fire burns lower, the visitors settle in for the night, wrapping themselves in their cloaks. One of them strings the shells into a loose circle and places it on the ground beside her, like a portable piece of the river she came from. You glance at your own pouch, heavier now with bone beads, and imagine the stories they've already soaked up before ever reaching your hands. Joke 3. As you stand to head for your sleep, "Ingmat," you say, "if I wake up wearing all these beads, you'll know I've joined their group." The person next to you grins and replies, "Only if you bring us more pelt." The fire's last glow flickers over the traded goods, casting shadows that make them look older, as if they've been here far longer than the night. You fall asleep thinking about the hands they passed through, the places they've seen, and the fact that now they're part of your story too. The fire has burned down to a patient bed of coals, their glow soft enough to pull the stars closer. You stretch out your legs, leaning back on your hands, when someone begins to hum a slow, deep note that hangs in the air like smoke. It's joined by another, then another, until the sound swells into a low current that slides through the camp. No words, no real melody, just voices weaving in and out of each other, a kind of breathing in unison. This is how the night songs start. Not loud, not meant for dancing, but for keeping the dark at arm's length. You've been part of them since you were small, pressed between older shoulders, trying to match the pitch without letting your voice crack. Now you close your eyes and let it settle into your bones. Someone taps two stones together in a slow, steady beat. A soft drum made from stretched hide joins in, its thump as regular as a heart. The sound builds but never rushes. It's meant to be the opposite of urgency. Mainstream fact. Archaeological evidence of simple instruments, flutes from bird bones, drums from hides, shows that music has been with humans for tens of thousands of years. Historians still argue whether early songs were mainly for ritual, communication, or simply for passing time. You hum along, your voice finding a place in the low harmony. Beside you, a child sways gently, eyelids half lowered, her fingers tracing patterns in the dirt. Across the fire, the visitors from the other group join in without hesitation, their voices carrying a slightly different cadence. It folds into the rest as naturally as smoke folds into air. The song shifts, as it often does. Someone adds a rising note that curls over the steady bass, then falls away again. It's like the fire itself is singing, steady ember at the core, sparks of improvisation flaring at the edges. You feel the rhythm in your ribs, in the soft give of the ground under you. Joke 1. You lean toward the hunter next to you and murmur, "If we keep this up, the wolves might just ask to join in." He chuckles quietly, but doesn't break the hum. The elders occasionally slip in a line of words, often old ones you don't fully understand. They're from before your time, maybe from before even theirs. The syllables feel worn smooth, like river stones, but no one stops to explain. You catch one fragment, something about the moon pulling the water's hand, and let it drift through your mind like a leaf on a stream. Mainstream fact. Certain indigenous traditions around the world have night songs meant to hold the camp together, where the repetition and shared rhythm create a sense of collective safety. Historians still argue whether these were practical, masking noises from predators, or purely symbolic acts of unity. The firelight paints everyone in gold and shadow. The shell strands from earlier glint faintly as they sway from someone's neck in time with the beat. You catch the scent of herbs tossed into the fire, releasing a sweet, resinous smoke that threads through the voices. It makes the song taste different in your mouth somehow, like memory flavored with pine. Someone passes you a small drum, and you tap along with the stones, keeping your strikes soft so they blend into the pulse. You lose track of time. It's just sound and warmth, your body moving without thinking. When the beat falters, it's not because the song ends, it just fades, each voice slipping away until there's only the fire again. For a few moments, no one speaks. The silence feels fuller than words. Then a boy breaks it with a whisper. "Can we sing the sun here faster?" The chuckle that moves through the circle is like another kind of harmony. Joke 2. You answer, "If we try that, it might come early and demand breakfast." Someone adds, "And I'm not sharing my tubers," which gets a few low laughs. The night settles heavier now, the kind that lets your shoulders drop. A few people begin drifting toward their sleeping places, the glow of coals soft against their backs. The visitors stay a little longer, humming quietly to themselves as they watch the sparks climb into the dark. Before you leave the circle, you glance at the sky. The moon's higher than you thought, its light catching in the still, damp leaves at the camp's edge. For a moment, you imagine the sound of the song rising all the way up to it, brushing against its face like a familiar greeting. Historians still argue whether early people imagined the moon as a watcher, a guide, or just a clock in the sky. Tonight, you decide it's a listener. Joke 3. As you stand, you tell the nearest person, if the moon starts humming back, wake me up. They shake their head and say, no, I'll just let you dream it. The night holds steady as you walk away, your ears still tuned to the echo of voices and the slow, shared heartbeat they left behind. You wake before the camp stirs, not because the sky demands it, but because a thin, brittle cough slices the hush. It comes from the far side of the shelter where the elder sleeps, the one whose stories put feathers on the night. You sit up, listen again, and the sound arrives a second time, drier, higher, like bark rubbed on stone. You grab your water gourd and the small bundle of herbs you keep wrapped in a strip of hide, then slip across the mats. The elder's face is grey with the sort of tired that isn't solved by one good meal. His breath comes shallow, each inhale testing a limit you'd rather not think about. You kneel and lift his head gently, letting a small sip of water pass his lips. He swallows, the cords in his neck shifting like pulled twine, and he blinks at you with that half-smile he saves for stubborn children and weather forecasts. You tell him to save his heroics for nightfall. He drags a finger along your forearm as if to underline the joke. You loosen the bindings on your herb bundle. The yellow flowers from yesterday's foraging still carry a honeyed scent. You crush a few between your fingers and the smell lifts like sunlight. Into a small clay bowl, you add a pinch of dried leaf that the healer swears calms the chest and a thumb of resin shaved into curls so thin they look like sugary bark. A little water, a slow swirl with a stick, medicine that looks unassuming enough to fool even the most skeptical cough. Mainstream fact, plant-based remedies. Infusions, poultices, chewed leaves show up in traces on ancient tools and even in the plaque of fossilized teeth, suggesting people chewed or prepared certain plants for healing long before anyone wrote a recipe. Historians still argue whether knowledge of which plants worked came from long trial and error or careful observation of animals, watching which leaves a sick deer sought or which bark a fevery. She child instinctively sucked. You've done your share of both, testing, watching, remembering. The elder sips the infusion, making a face like you've given him boiled river rock. You lean close and stage whisper that the batch improves dramatically after sunrise, which is to say never. He wheezes a laugh that rattles but doesn't collapse, and you count that as medicine too. Joke 1. You promise to garnish the next cup with a fashionable shell bead to improve the flavour. He swats the air without dignity, which is exactly the right amount of dignity for the moment. A girl slips in with a damp cloth warmed at the fire. You press it to the elder's chest, then lift it to his temples, trading heat for the kind of comfort that teaches the body to release its fists. Outside, a bird tries a hopeful note and then thinks better of it. The camp continues its slow yawn toward morning, the scrape of flint, the hush of feet. A pot set down with care that still finds the one loud stone. You check the elder's hands, cool, the skin thin as onion skin parchment. You rub a little fat into the knuckles where the cold likes to live, working in circles until the skin remembers it's attached to a warm body. You blow across your fingertips, then across his, and for a moment the breath between you feels like a small rope you're both holding. He nods toward the pouch hanging at his side, and you unloop it, expecting a charm or a keepsake. Inside, a small twist of dried berries and a folded strip of painted bark with faded zigzags. He taps it, eyes glittering, and you know what he's asking. Place it near his head. Some marks are maps, some are anchors. You wedge it between the mat and the hide post, where it catches a stray beam of morning light. Quirky tidbit. Last dry season, the healer claimed a paste of ash and crushed snail shell drew heat from the body like night draws colour from a leaf. She dabbed it on foreheads with a ritual waggle that did nothing for science but everything for morale. You consider fetching some, decide you will if the cough sours, and instead reach for the little whistle bone the children use. You blow gently, barely a note, and the elder's eyes soften, the tune from last night's hum still clinging to your breath like a leftover ember. Outside, you collect a handful of minty, sharp leaves from the near edge of camp and crush them in your palms. Steam them over the fire's edge in a damp leaf packet until they sweat scent, then bring the packet back and hold it beneath the elder's nose. He inhales, coughs, inhales again, this time less like bark, more like a tired hinge. He taps the side of your hand, twice, pause, once. His old rhythm for, "Tell me something foolish." You oblige. You describe your mammoth painting and confess the potato phase. You report that the storm installed a frog as chief engineer of the trench, and you claim the kingfisher is taking bribes to heckle only your casting. Joke 2. You add that if the fire spirits keep demanding tubers, you'll unionize with the rocks. The elder wheezes a smile so wide it nearly wipes the cough from the room. Mainstream fact, evidence from burial sites shows elders often received careful care in life, healed fractures, worn teeth, smoothed by soft foods, signs of long-term survival past injuries that would have killed the unhelped. This implies communities made space for the old, not just as burdens, but as keepers of knowledge. Migratory routes, seasons of plants, dangerous cliffs, stories that doubled as maps. Historians still argue whether such care was universal or varied wildly across regions and times. In your camp, it isn't a debate, it's breakfast. You feed the elder a softened berry he chews with the patience of trees, and when he swallows you feel the camp's center of gravity shift back into place. He gestures to the doorway. You lift the flap. Morning has dared to show some color, the wet leaves from last night's storm catching light like sequins. Beyond the clearing, mist smudges the tree trunks into ghosts. The visitors from the neighboring group are already packing, looping shells and tying their rolled cloaks with quick, practiced hands. One of them looks over, sees you with the elder, and lifts a palm. You return it. She nods, then tucks a small sprig of something into her belt, perhaps their own version of courage. You set a pot near the coals and slice a tuber thin, letting the rounds soften in a little water with crushed seed. The smell coaxes your stomach into making promises it can't keep quietly. When the rounds are ready, you mash a few with a flat stick and mix in a smear of fat to make them slide easier. The elder eats slowly, but he eats. You tuck another log to the fire, which groans in gratitude. He dozes, and you take the chance to tidy, rolling up the used cloth, tucking the herb stems into a twist of bark so the smell lingers. You redraw the line of the mat so water can't find it. You adjust the shelter flap to invite just enough breeze. The small adjustments, the kind no one notices unless you forget, turn the space into a gentle place to breathe. When he wakes again, the cough returns, but softer. You steady his shoulder and guide the next sip. He pats your wrist. The gesture says a few things at once, that he sees you, that the world is still arranged, that the thread from last night's story hasn't broken. He rasps something about the moon pulling the water's hand, and you answer that the river is behaving itself, kingfishers back on union rules. Joke 3. You promise if he rests, you'll repaint the mammoth to look less like a potato. He closes one eye and croaks, "Leave it. Potatoes are delicious," which, scientifically speaking, you cannot dispute. You settle into a watch that is part nursing, part listening to the camp's day gather speed. Footsteps soften the dirt, cords creak, someone laughs too loudly at nothing in particular. You pass moments counting the elder's breaths in sets of 5, matching your own to his, letting the cadence become a low road your mind can walk without tripping. On that road, a thought. You remember the obsidian-like blade the stranger offered, the way it caught light like a throat clearing. You consider asking the leader to trade it for herbs if the visitors have some you lack. You also consider asking the storyteller later how he would spin a cough into a warning or a blessing. Historians still argue whether early healers and storytellers were the same people or just sat close enough to share breath. Watching the elder's chest rise and fall, you think the answer might be yes. By mid-morning, the cough has settled into something ordinary, the kind of complaint a nap can negotiate. You tuck the painted bark a little higher so it catches more light, smooth the mat, and promise to return with broth once the pot decides it's soup. Outside, the river mumbles. The willow drips the last bright coins of storm water, and the camp treads its path between necessity and care. You stand, feeling the ache in your knees that someday someone will rub warm for you. You stretch, tilt your face toward the thin sun, and step back into the day with the quiet satisfaction of a job not finished. Healing rarely is, but underway. Somewhere behind you the elder shifts and sighs, and the sound is as good as any song for warding off the noon. You tilt your head back until the world becomes sky, and there it is, swollen, pale, and slightly smug. The moon lounging above the tree line like it owns the night. It throws a soft sheet of light over the camp, bright enough to find your way, gentle enough to keep the shadows secrets. You let your eyes adjust until the stars step forward too, silver seeds scattered with someone's careful, careless hand. The fire behind you pops once, like punctuation, and you breathe in the cool that always follows a day wrung dry by sun and storm. You've been measuring days all your life without a word for calendar, but the moon nags you into using one anyway. You count 1 night since the last big storm, 3 since the traders left, 6 since the hare sprinted you into humility. The moon has been doing its slow public magic all that time, swelling and thinning like the belly of a sleeping animal. You raise a finger and blot it out, then unblot it and pretend you're in charge. The moon graciously does not correct you. Mainstream fact, people across the world have long counted time by the moon's phases. It's the easiest clock you can't drop, a reliable loop of dark to bright to dark again every 29 and a bit nights. Historians still argue whether some carved tally bones mark these cycles, the Ishango bone for one, lined with notches that might chart moons, or maybe something else entirely. You think of the tally stick by the toolmaker's sleeping mat, the one each child pretends not to touch. Its notches tell a story even when you aren't sure which story. You step beyond the circle of firelight and let your feet find the river path. Moonlight turns it into a ribbon, glossy and restless. A kingfisher clicks somewhere downstream, owning its section of silver. You watch the flow and wonder. Do the herds lift their heads when the moon fattens, sensing its pull the way the river seems to? Some hunters swear full moon nights scatter grazing animals farther across the plains. Others claim it draws them to open ground where the light is safer. Historians still argue whether lunar brightness actually changes animal movement, or if hunters simply notice more when they can see farther. Either way, tonight's light feels like advice. You kneel to run fingers across damp sand. It holds the moon like a second, unsteady moon in your hand, cold, gritty, briefly yours. You draw a crooked arc, then add short slashes for nights you remember. The storm, slash, the fish, slash, the stranger's shimmering blade, slash. You pause, then scratch a small mammoth potato-shaped in honor of your art career, because jokes are also measurements of time. Joke 1. You whisper to the river that your mammoth improves with every moon and ask it not to report you to the art wall. The river gurgles, which you generously interpret as praise. Back in camp, a few others tilt their faces up too. One taps a knuckle against a bead strand with each slow count, turning the shells into a soft metronome. Another sits with a bundle of short sticks, arranging and rearranging them into heaps that will become tomorrow's memory. Quirky tidbit. The elder once claimed that if you sleep with a polished shell under your tongue on the first night of a fat moon, your dreams will run forward instead of backward, full of places you haven't been yet. You tried it once, your dreams ran sideways and complained about the inconvenience. You pace the clearing's edge, eyes drifting between moon and silhouettes, a hide line tugged by the breeze like a slow heartbeat, the willow making a black lace of the sky, a pair of teenagers pretending the moon makes them invisible. You pretend you don't see them because invisibility is a skill worth practicing. The air smells like wet bark and cooled ash. Taunt. He kind of crisp that scrubs your thoughts. You catch yourself murmuring numbers. 1 moon to the gathering of berries, 2 to the peak of heat, 3 to the first thin winds. The camp moves by these counts even when no one says them. A mother plans a journey so the baby's rest matches full moon nights. Fishers favour half-lands of light when the river hides less. Traders time their arrivals for the brightest evenings, when camps welcome strangers with eyes wide open. Mainstream fact: countless cultures have named each full moon for seasonal cues: harvest, snow, salmon, tying sky to ground so tightly you can hear the knot creak. Historians still argue whether names led the work or the work named the moons. You suspect the answer is yes. A breeze lifts the hair at your nape. You remember the elder's fragment, the moon pulls the water's hand, and glance at the river again. You've seen it plumper on certain nights, as if the moon had convinced it to breathe deeper. You've also seen your own mood trespass into the same rhythm, restless when the moon is a spotlight, inward when it's a sliver. You wonder if that's just you, or if everyone in the circle quietly ticks along to the same hidden pendulum. Joke 2. You decide the moon is the camp's laziest supervisor, always watching, never carrying a single basket. You settle on a flat rock and trace its pitted surface. The pits catch moonlight like tiny bowls. You think about marking them, filling each with a pebble at dusk, emptying them at dawn, leaving a trace of the night's length in stones that will confuse tomorrow you in a charming, accusatory way. You think about replacing pebbles with beads from the trade, making time gleam. Above, a thin cloud slides across the moon and the clearing dims. For a breath, everyone holds still, as if someone lowered the camp's eyelids. When the cloud drifts on, the light returns and you feel the slightest collective exhale. Hissed. Orions still argue whether early gatherings treated eclipses as omens or as opportunities for quick naps. You vote naps because omens don't warm your toes. You consider the art wall, safe under its overhang. Paintings look different by moonlight, edges soften, animals seem to move. You've stumbled awake before, certain the deer were turning their heads, that your mammoth nodded in approval or staged a potato protest. Quirky tidbit. A traveller once taught you to moonburn designs onto bark by laying thin leaves in patterns overnight. The dew and light, he claimed, kissed the bark into faint images by morning. You tried it. The only thing that kissed the bark was a slug. Still, the idea clings the way stories do. Your eyes return to the moon and refuse to leave. A slow, familiar calculation hovers. How many nights until it's thin enough that the stars roar back? How many until the next bright sheet lets hunters track scuffs on grass at midnight? You think about planning the next trap check for a half moon. Enough light to see, not enough to spotlight you for anything with teeth. You think about the elder's cough and decide to brew tomorrow's medicine when the moon is a step smaller, because he likes saying with a sort of ceremony, "Ah, the waning cures." You push to your feet and walk the camp's edge, counting your steps for no reason beyond the comfort of numbers. At the storage pit you pause to check the lashings. At the lean-to you retie a line and smooth a corner that dared wrinkle. At the sleeping mats you tilt one so the night breeze can thread it. All of it small, all of it timekeeping in a language of knots and angles. Someone behind you murmurs that the moon looks close enough to touch. You say, "If you grab it, ask for a better spear throw for me." Joke 3. A voice from the shadows answers, "I'll ask for 2, 1 for you, 1 for the kingfishers and more ion-dues," and you send your best grin into the dark, trusting it to land. When you finally sit, the coals wear their last bright jewelry, and the willow combs the moonlight into slow stripes across the ground. You tuck your tally stick under your sleeping mat, press your palm to the earth until the night's cool admits you, and build a quiet promise with yourself to count the next 20 nights in dots of charcoal on a smooth stone, to see if your mood, the river, the herds, and your luck swing with the curve of light above. Historians still argue whether you can plan a life with a sky stone for a clock. You decide you can plan a night. You close your eyes and the moon slides to the inside of your lids, soft, patient, steady. The camp breathes. The river moves. Somewhere a frog clears its throat like a council meeting in miniature. You let the silver spill over you until even numbers dissolve. You take the stick from the last watch and settle by the embers, the night pressing close enough to taste, cool, faintly metallic with a whisper of wet willow left over from the storm. The coals glow like sleepy eyes. You nudge them with the stick until they blink a little wider. Sparks lift and then think better of the journey. The camp's breathing is spaced out now, a soft snore here, the rustle of a dream there, a child's sigh as tiny as a gnat's wing. You wrap your cloak tighter, feel the familiar rub of cordage at your wrist, the same twist you rolled this afternoon, and let your ears widen. Night has its own map, and you read it without moving. There's the river's hush, heavier since the rain. There's the reed bed's papery chatter when the breeze remembers it. There's the small, wet thump from your trench where the frog engineer punches the time card. You grin into the dark. Some workers never miss a shift. You walk the perimeter in a slow arc, the stick tapping lightly at your shin like a metronome. At the storage pit, you run a hand over the lashings. At the lean-to's corner, you tighten the knot you pretended not to notice earlier. At the drying rack, you test a line. It hums a note when you pluck it, which you decide is the camp's version of purring. On the ground near the rack, you crush a pinch of minty leaves between your fingers and smear the scent on your forearms. It's not crocodile dung sunscreen, thank the spirits for standards, but it is your favourite way to nudge the biting insects toward less discerning diners. You pause where the fire's light gives up and the night begins. Your eyes adjust until the dark has grades. The crooked charcoal of the willow, the soft graphite of the grass, the pearl-grey river polishing the sky. The moon rides lower now, thinning itself on the ridge. You let your thoughts thin with it until your senses rise to fill the seed. Pace. A rustle. You freeze, breath balanced on a fingertip. The sound comes again, a careful parting of grass. You slide the stick to your left hand and ease your right to the small sling at your belt. A loop of cord, a smooth stone warm from your palm. The rustle stops. A heartbeat. 2. Then a shape unfolds itself into the edge of moonlight. A fox, lean as a hunger, nose high, assessing the smell of roasted memory around your camp. You tilt your head, it tilts back, unimpressed by authority. With exaggerated delicacy, it lifts a paw, decides your trench is a moat it cannot be bothered to leap, and fades into grass with a sigh so polite you consider inviting it to dinner. Joke 1. You whisper, kitchen's closed, and the fox, being a fox, does not tip. You crouch, press your palm to the ground. The The dirt is cool, damp at the knuckles, storm water still hoarded below the surface. Somewhere out there, hooves scuff. Not close, not coming closer. The herds are where the moon told them to be. You stand again and glance toward the rock wall. Even from here you can feel your potato-phase mammoth pretending to chew the horizon. Hold the line, friend, you murmur. The wall holds. Mainstream fact. Circles of old hearths and repeated ash layers at ancient sites tell the same story you're living. Night fires tended over and over. Their light and smoke a boundary predators respect more often than not. Charred bone, cracked stone, and blackened earth show people kept flames as companions for thousands of nights like this. Historians still argue whether groups like yours assigned strict sentries or rotated watch as attention and insomnia allowed. Tonight, your attention is awake enough for everyone. Your insomnia is too proud to ask for relief. At the camp's north edge, you find the little string of shells someone hung earlier, a motion whisperer. You flick it. It answers with a small rain sound. Not much use against a cat, plenty against a careless step. You set a second line of brittle twigs in a shallow V between two shrubs. One sneeze of sound if anything larger than a rabbit blunders through. Quirky tidbit. The traders once showed you how they sprinkle crushed bitter root at a path's mouth to confuse the noses of the night. You've tried it twice. It mostly confused you when you forgot you'd done it and wondered why your own footprints smelled like a grudge. Back at the ember ring, you feed a splinter of resin to the heat. It sighs into brightness, that honey-gloss flare you've come to love, and the smoke turns sweet and a little medicinal. The light reaches one mat, then another, erasing shadows that look like crouching things and redrawing them as blankets and knees. Your shoulders drop a notch. You think about the stranger's shimmering blade, now wrapped and tucked beside the leader's sleeping place. When the firelight caught it earlier, it seemed to hold a piece of daylight hostage. You imagine its edge by your hand tonight, overkill for a watch that mostly argues with moths, but you can't deny the comfort of the thought. You settle for your flint knife, reassuringly honest in its dulling and resharpening, and let your thumb learn its edge again. A soft footfall behind you. You turn, sling half raised, then lower it when the elder's silhouette drifts into the ember glow like a story deciding to be told anyway. He taps his chest, one cough only, the compromise you agreed on, and sits just long enough to warm his hands. You wrap his fingers in yours, feel the heat seep in. Moon's thinning, he rasps. You nod. So's the woodpile. He smiles, the kind that forgives jokes that barely qualify as jokes. You hand him a sip of water, tuck his cloak closer, and stand with him while the camp's small sounds remind you that living is just a lot of quiet maintenance with occasional dramatic lighting. When he shuffles back to his mat, you circle once more. The kingfisher clicks downstream, the Union steward counting hours. In the reeds, something large exhales, a boar, maybe, turning over its opinion of you. You stop and listen without trying to decide. Let the night be what it is. You're here to hear it, not fix it. Joke 2. You tell the reeds, if you're going to spook me, at least form a committee, and the reeds decline leadership opportunities. You squat where the grass gives you a view of both treeline and sky, and let memory crawl over you like warm ash. The storm drumming the hide, the frog declaring eminent domain in your trench, the trader's shells clinking night into little circles, the hares sprint brisking your lungs, the fish playing questions with your line, the paint smelling like iron and old blood below the overhang. Each image is a coal. Together they're a fire you can sit by without lifting a stick. Your mind tries to climb into tomorrow, as minds do. You let it go a few branches up. Check the snares at half moon, mend the net, trade resin for herb if the river folks drift back, and then coax it down again. Right now is a job too. Count 10 slow breaths, scrape the coals into a tighter knot, listen left, listen right, look high, look low. You think about teaching the youngest kids the art of night listening, how to hear a rabbit versus a person, how to tell wind from intention, how to trust stillness without trusting it too much. Historians still argue whether such skills were taught formally or soaked in through proximity, the way smoke teaches everything it touches to remember fire. Either way, you consider starting with the shell string and a game, step woo. Here it won't sing. The moon edges closer to the ridge, shaving its light finer. Stars come back like old friends who know the route without checking the path. Your eyes pick out a tight cluster that has always looked to you like 3 seeds and a stubborn sprout. You count them, lose count, start over, counting for no reason except that reasons sometimes scare off sleep too efficiently. From the dark beyond the willow, a pair of eyes briefly gathers moonlight. You don't move, you let the eyes decide. They blink, sink, vanish. Your heart, which had been pretending to be a quiet person minding their own business, admits it was peaking. You pat your chest as if smoothing a ruffled cloak. You make one last round, slow enough to not wake the earth. At the far side of camp, you nudge a sleeping mat so dew won't find the corner. At the woodpile, you pull 2 logs into arm's reach for whoever relieves you. At the ember ring, you lay a small ladder of twigs, a ready promise for the next hands. Joke 3, you bow to the frog and say, "Shift change soon. Please brief the incoming management." And the frog, deeply qualified, says nothing. When the time comes, you touch the shoulder of the next watcher, feel the sleepy startle become recognition, then gratitude. You give the quiet report: fox, boar breath, shells singing only when asked, moon on the ridge, coals eager to be good. They pull on a cloak, accept the stick, and you pass them the night like a bowl you've licked clean and still respect. You lie down at the edge of the heat and the stars, 1 foot close to the ember's polite warmth, 1 foot testing the cool. The willow's shadow threads your face. The river repeats its 1-syllable story. Your last waking thought is practical and unremarkable. Check the shell string at dawn for damp. And somehow that humility pleases you. Not every night ends on a prophecy. Some end on a well-tied knot, a watch that didn't need to be heroic, and a camp that will wake to find nothing exciting happened. You smile into your cloak, which is the closest thing to a prayer you've got, and let the slow, safe dark climb the ladder you left for it. You pass the watchstick to the next pair of hands, feel the night loosen its grip on your shoulders, and drift toward your mat. The ground remembers you. The woven grass settles as if it's been waiting for your weight all evening. The fire is a low, red smile now, painting the shelter poles in quiet amber and tracing the edges of sleeping faces. You pull your cloak over your chest and slide your feet toward the coals until your toes admit they are no longer heroic. Breath by breath, the world simplifies. The river reduces itself to 1 long syllable. The willow's shadow combs the wall into patient stripes. Your tally stick lies where you tucked it, a slim measure of intentions for tomorrow that refuses to be loud tonight. You close your eyes, and the day arrives again, but softer, as if wrapped in hide. The hare's sprint, the fish's silver question, the storm's drumming fingers, the trader's shells clicking like tame rain, the bone hook humming in your palm, the stranger's blade catching firelight like it was saving the last daylight for you. You roll onto your side and face the wall where the paint dries, your mammoth, still a little potato, still yours. The red ochre glows in the afterlight, and for a moment the animal seems to shift its weight, like it's settling too. Joke 1, you whisper, "No snoring," and the mammoth, a professional, declines to respond. Sleep comes in small negotiations. You stretch your legs, tuck the cloak under your chin, and let your breath match the tiny, even sighs that ripple through camp. Mainstream fact. In some modern hunter-gatherer groups, people don't all sleep or wake at once. The staggered rhythms create an almost accidental sentinel effect. Someone's nearly always awake, and so the fire and the camp are nearly always watched. You feel that safety now, the quiet shuffle of the new watcher, the occasional rustle as someone rolls, the tender clink of shells on a wrist. The night isn't empty, it's staffed. At the edge of drowsiness, the mind starts arranging the day's pieces into stranger mosaics. Your frog foreman from the trench appears, wearing a crown made of willow, inspecting the storm's paperwork. The kingfisher perches on your bone hook like a union rep approving equipment. The elder's cough becomes a drumbeat that turns mercifully into last night's hummed song. Historians still argue whether dreams in deep prehistory were harvested as messages, used as maps, or just treated as night noise the brain makes. You've known mornings when a dream pointed you to a berry thicket, and others when it suggested befriending a thundercloud. You passed. You rub your thumb over the cord at your wrist, feeling the twist you rolled this afternoon. Quirky tidbit. Someone once taught you to tie a tiny knot at bedtime and untie it at dawn to keep your dreams from wandering off without you. You tie one now, a neat little loop you could break half asleep and tell it politely to mind the door. Joke 2, you add, if a dream asks for a snack, tell it we're out of tubers. And somewhere in the back of your mind, a very offended dream drafts a complaint. Your thoughts thin until details grow large. The fire's last coal is a red planet. A gnat's wing is a sail. The hide roof's stitch line is the trail you followed this morning, and the gap where two seams meet is the shallow place in the river where the big fish turned. You drift in that soft suspension where sounds are far and close at once. The moonlight at the shelter's edge is a calm lake. Your breath makes the smallest ripples. You hover there long enough to feel the border of sleep, then cross. In the first simple dream, your painted mammoth lumbers out of the wall and stands beside you at the fire. Its fur smells like warm dust and old grass. Its eye is huge and kind. It nudges your shoulder toward the coals as if to say, "Keep warm, little human, and don't forget to feed the stories. You promise you won't." The mammoth nods, a very dignified potato, and returns to its place without smudging the ochre. The dream changes shape. Now you're on the riverbank and the water runs backward, not frightening, just laughing a little at your surprise. The kingfisher clicks twice, which in dream language clearly means obviously, and then hands you a shell that's also the moon, light sloshing inside like milk. You set it on a flat stone and it becomes a bowl of coals, and you realize, with the unquestioning logic of dreams, that you've just been handed night itself to keep safe. You keep it. It looks good on you. Joke 3. You tell the kingfisher you'll return the moon bowl tomorrow-ish, and it signs a leaf as a receipt. Somewhere outside the dream, a sleeping neighbor shifts. The fire settles with a sigh. A watch step passes, pauses, and moves on. None of it dislodges you. Mainstream fact, people have slept on hides, on grass mats, on raised frames of woven branches. Traces of mats and bedding show up even in very old sites as ghostly layers of plant silica and compressed fibers. Historians still argue whether pillows were common, bundled clothes, folded hides, a smooth stone for the neck. Your arm is your pillow tonight, the crook of your elbow exactly the size of your face, a design perfected by repetition. Deep in sleep, the storm returns but softer. The rain is grain falling through fingers, drumming a lullaby. The willow is a curtain pulled slowly across a stage. The stranger's blade is just, to fish scale, harmless and bright. The elder's cough never quite arrives. It resolves into breath, steadier each cycle, as if healed by the simple arrogance of rest. When the night's last hour leans against the shelter, you don't notice it. You are busy being a small animal in a warm nest, the great invention that outsmarted teeth and weather, a fire, a circle, a watch, a mat, a cloak, a shared night. You float now and the pace slows. The fire's glow slips from red to ember to memory. The air cools by a polite degree. The hide roof loosens its drum into a soft cloth of quiet. You are allowed to let go of the counting. the shells, the moons, the steps around the camp, and trade it for a gentler arithmetic. Inhale, exhale, and all the little spaces between. The river keeps its one-word story, lower now, rounder at the edges, as if the stones have yawned wide enough to cradle it. The camp settles deeper, a murmuration of rest. Cloaks rise and fall in long, even swells. Somewhere beyond the willow, a night insect writes a thin silver line of sound and then closes the book. The tally stick sleeps under your mat. The cord's knot at your wrist loosens itself without fuss. The mammoth on the wall, kind and patient, returns to stillness, but leaves a thumbprint of warmth pressed into the room. You let your breath lengthen until each one feels like a small tide. In, and your ribs broaden to fit the world. Out, and the world tucks itself around you. Thoughts arrive late and leave early, waving from a distance as they go. If a worry wanders in, it sits down beside the coals and forgets what it came for, lulled by the shared hush. Even the moon respects the hour, edging behind a kind cloud so the stars can work their soft glitter without supervision. If you need reassurance, take it. The trench holds, the roof ties are firm. The coals will remember how to be fire in the morning. The frog, tireless supervisor, keeps the night ledger tidy. The elder breathes. The kingfisher, off duty, dreams of perfectly cooperative fish. And you, wrapped in the oldest technology we ever made for ourselves, each other, sink the last inch into sleep, the good kind, the kind that mends the seams and sweetens the next dawn. The story will be here when you wake. For now, drift. The path narrows to down, and then to nothing you have to walk at all.